All right. Well, we are here with you tonight because we, as faculty, want to build an inclusive community that celebrates all of you, a diverse community that helps you to thrive and supports you so that you can grow and do your best work. And how do we do that? Some of it is super, super practical. At NYU, we want to see stronger and more thoughtful and more nuanced coverage of marginalized communities. And we're going to give you the tools and the funding to do that. Do you have a great story that explores the social, economic, or political challenges that face marginalized communities? Our department, as you may know or may not know, offers grants up to $1,000 for students to help make that happen. That's money that can help you cover your costs for travel, for research, for equipment, for instance. And are you looking to expand your network, to learn from professionals in the business? And we can help you with that too. You can apply for funding to attend a conference, a professional conference that explores the social, economic, and political challenges facing marginalized communities. And that's up to $500. That helps with registration or travel costs. So please, please keep an eye out for that. There will be emails about it. You'll see updates on the website too. We also run panels and workshops throughout the year. I'll have a little more information about that at the end of this discussion. But in addition to all of that, we also want to have frank conversations about what we sometimes face as journalists of color and allies. We're not under any illusions about the harsh realities that people from marginalized communities, from some of our communities, still encounter in newsrooms, in this city, in universities. And we're journalists and professors, but we live this reality too. And we know what it's like to try to do this work while members of our community are being attacked by bigots or even shot by police. We know what it's like to deal with microaggressions, but we also know what it's like to have our inspiration, our creativity, and our relentless drive result in amazing work that has real impact. And we can't change all of the challenges that are out there, but what we can do and what we can say to you is that we are here, we see you, we hear you, we want you to do powerful work and to support you and to be sounding boards if and when issues come up. Sometimes people feel alone in dealing with this stuff, and we want you to know that you are not alone. We are here. So tonight you're going to hear from a few members of our diverse faculty. They're going to talk about their work and offer a bit of advice about navigating newsrooms, about covering issues, stories, and after that we'll take any questions you might have, and of course we've got snacks and drinks. And we're going to start first with Jason Samuels, who is here on screen. Hey, Jason.
Professor Sworns, thanks so much for introducing me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. It's really an honor to talk to you guys. I'm going to try to be super brief. I've taught at NYU for 15 years. I went into teaching because I went to graduate school. I had a empowering and a wonderful experience, and I wanted to get into teaching to hopefully encourage students to get into the profession and prepare them and make sure they were equipped to succeed as they moved out. My background is in broadcast news and documentaries, and I have devoted a large portion of my career in reporting and telling stories about people of color, and that's been my goal. And as Professor Sworns had mentioned, it's not always the easiest job to get these stories told, but it's incredibly important, and I found it to be incredibly rewarding. I just wanted to say two things to all of you. The first thing I want to say is that we, as a faculty, want you to be successful, and we want to do everything we can to support you. The one thing that I wasn't really taught in journalism school that's critically important, but really has nothing to do with reporting, writing, researching. And that's the importance of networking. And I make it a point in every class that I teach to take time to talk to my students about networking. And because I may not have many of you in my class, I just want to take a minute to stress the importance of networking. When I was much younger and making my way and trying to land those first jobs and going to graduate school, I focused completely on the work and I kept my head down. And along the way, I engage with people who would say, Jason, you're a sharp young journalist. If you ever need any help, let me know, stay in touch. And I was so focused, I just wanted to do my work and my work would speak for itself. In reality, your work may speak for itself, but it also doesn't hurt to build relationships with people. And it's critically important, especially when you're trying to find that internship or that job. And the faculty here will help you do those things, but it's important for you to have relationships with people. And so right now I'm working with a lot of students to help them find that job that they want or that internship. And the first question I ask is, do you know people in the industry, or who do you know? And it's critically important for you, whether it's in your classes, to get to know your faculty well, your classmates. You're going to meet alums, you're going to meet guest speakers, you're going to have career fairs. Take advantage of all of that. You have to understand that now that you're an NYU student, or if you're a continuing student, part of your experience here is not only learning, but connecting with people and building relationships with people. You are now part of a network and you need to take advantage of that. And you will find people along the way that want to help you. And so don't do what I did, which is ignore these offers to help. And again, whether it's a faculty member or not, please build these relationships. It will serve you well as you move forward. And I'll just close by saying, if any of you have interest in broadcast news, broadcast journalism, documentaries, reach out to me. You can come by my office. We can talk about your goals, your aspirations, how to find an internship. Please do not hesitate. But I just want to make sure students understand the importance of networking, and I'll pass the baton to other folks, but please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I'm glad you're here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you all for coming today. My name is Suketu Mehta, and I teach classes in reporting and about New York City. I grew up in India, and I came to New York, to Jackson Heights, when I was 14. And I was supposed to follow the family diamond business, but instead I became a writer. So I'm a failed diamond merchant. You know, when I started out in journalism, it was so rare to see someone that wasn't white. So it has changed for the better. But I'll just tell you one story about when I began. I was writing a story for the New York Times magazine about diamonds in India, and the magazine had sent out a celebrity French-Brazilian photographer with me, and I arranged the whole trip. I took him to my family, set up all the interviews, and I wrote the copy. He had the photographs. We come back to New York, and we're in a meeting with the foreign editor of the New York Times magazine, and he was this old white dude. He'd, gone to all his foreign assignments, and he was basically now one step short of retirement. And he's looking at the photos of the French photographer and saying, amazing photos, amazing photos. And while he's doing this, he's picking his nose. Then he takes out a booger from his nose and smears it on my copy, on my text. He couldn't get away with that shit now. Things have changed, but this is what a lot of us were up against when we began. It was just utter contempt. And the other thing that happened to me when I started writing is I was told, yeah, you can do stories about India. Go to India and do your thing. And I said, but I've been here since I was 14. I was educated here. I don't just want to write stories about India. And said, well, what would you like to write about? And I said, well, I'd like to write about the stories of Ingmar Bergman and the making of ice cream. I want to write about anything that makes me interested, things that I'm curious about, because that's the great thing about being a journalist. You can follow your curiosity wherever it leads. So one thing I would advise you is, people will tell you to write about race or economics or, hardship or whatever, which is all good. It needs to be written about. But don't be limited by what they want you to write about. Write about anything you damn well want to. And then see if it can get published. And, push. No one else will give you that license. So you have to give yourself that license. I'll tell you another story about this, which was, I was in a meeting with the National Geographic editors. This was in the early 2000s. And they liked my writing, they wanted me to write for them. And I was in their DC office, and at that time it had so much money. It was a non-profit organization. They paid $5 a word. But things have changed. And they said, we want to make the magazine different. We know it's got this reputation, and how can we change it? And I said, well, you're always sending people out from here, mainly white writers and photographers, out to report on the other. So you're sending people here, with a pit helmet and a Leica to tribal Africa or India, and you bring back these exotic images of the others. How about you do a special issue of African and Indian writers and bring them to America and do a special issue on how America looks to the rest of the world, written by people from the other side of that divide. And they said, great idea, and of course never did anything about it. So, I think it's important as you move forward to give yourself that license and not be limited by the color of your skin, by what people expect you to write, and also not be limited politically. Because, I think most of us in this room are progressive, we have the right opinions on everything, but recently I bought a house in North Carolina during the pandemic, and I became aware of the complexities of everything. There are Black and Latino libertarians. There's a large group of African Americans and LGBT people who are buying guns and joining the NRA because they think that there's going to be a civil war and this is the way that they're going to protect themselves. So, be aware of the complexities of the political discourse. NYU is not reflective of the rest of the nation. Don't be afraid to engage. Hold fast to your principles, to your positions, but go out and talk to people who don't agree with you. Because that's the best way to give your readers a portrait of the complexity of the situation. And then the last piece of advice I have is just to reiterate what Jason Samuel said. Don't forget the NY part of NYU. You are here in New York, bankrupting yourselves to get a journalism degree. But the best part of that is you get access to the media capital of the universe. They're all here, the editors you need to meet, the agents, the producers. Learn all you can here, and then go out and have a drink with your classmates. I would recommend McSorley's across the street that Joseph Mitchell wrote about. Um, the people that you have in your cohort will help you get jobs, get apartments, maybe get a partner down the road. Make use of these opportunities. This is this wonderful city of 8 or 9 million people. I've been writing a book about it. And people will help you, but you have to make the first move to go and make that connection. Don't be shy. Advertise yourself. Thank you.
Didn't realize it was there. Hi, everyone. My name is Azadeh Moaveni. I run our concentration in global journalism. And I'll tell you a little bit about my reporting background and what I work on, because echoing everyone else, if I work on anything or if I have worked on anything that pertains to you or that you're interested in, you should come by my office, get to know me, come and see me, even if you're outside of my concentration, which I think most of you are. But that doesn't matter at all. If you are, whatever your concentration is, we're all here to guide you, to bounce ideas off with you, to give you feedback on your ideas. So please don't feel at all shy about availing yourself of us. I'm a foreign correspondent by training. I started specializing in the Middle East, so I covered Iran, Iraq, all of the turmoil of the Middle East for the last 20, 25 years. Thematically, I work on gender, women's rights and conflict, militancy. My last book was about women joining the Islamic State from Europe, from North Africa. So I have a kind of thematic focus there. I've worked on insurgencies in West Africa, in East Africa. I have a real interest in that. Climate and migration are part of those stories, and I'm very interested in those themes as well and how they can intersect with the kind of reporting that you might do. Religion, of course, hangs over all of those issues too. So if you're considering a story that might touch on any of those themes, feel free to come and see me and just make use of whatever feedback we can give you. On the kind of subject of, pursue stories or ideas that you are interested in, I really truly believe that. You should have the confidence and feel the entitlement to work on whatever you want. I think at the same time, like if you, because by dint of your identity and your background, have a language or an expertise or a knowledge of a community or a subject that makes you passionate about it and that gives you a perspective and knowledge that others don't have, like feel absolutely as well encouraged to make the best use of that. I think all of our careers have probably toggled between doing that, covering the stories around places or dynamics that we know best by kind of dint of who we are, and then taking the capital that we build from that reporting to do whatever else we want to do as well. If I were to impart anything, if you haven't arrived here with a language, find a way to build a language. That is going to be your key to reporting in this city, to your reporting life. It will open doors. So, I know that we don't necessarily structurally have that built in, but there's lots of resources in the city. The city is full of people that you can learn languages with and ways to do that. So. That's for me been a really important part of how I've reported deeply on all of the places that I've tried to work in, sort of being able to speak with people directly. So if I have a bit of advice to you, it's about language. And then that's really it. Please come talk to me afterwards. Please come visit me in office hours. It's really a pleasure to see all of you, a warm welcome to you. And I'm going to pass you over to David.
Well, I want to first of all thank Professor Swarms for doing this, because this is so important. And it's really important for us to continue these conversations, excuse me, about covering marginalized communities. And I am, uh, I was speaking about this. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Anyway, my name is David Dent. I'm director of the Reporting the Nation, Reporting New York program, and it's good to see some of my third semester students rather here, as well as first semester students. Um, I've worked, have a background in both television as well as long form magazines and books. And something that I think about that we really need to face when I heard Suketu's story, um, it reminded me of something that happened, and I wonder if this still could happen today. About maybe more years ago, 30 years ago, in the 90s, I did a piece I was a reporter at a television station, and I did a series on African Americans in the military, and part of it was tied to Colin Powell's rise, but we explored that subject through four parts. It actually ended up winning an award from the National Association of Black Journalists. So the military, the public relations or public information officers of the military were very open. They were very professional in working with me. So then, about a few weeks after that piece, I got a call from an editor at Essence Magazine who said, I'd like for you to do a piece for us on Black women in the military. And I said, most certainly, I would. And so I pursued this piece for Essence. And the very same people that from the military who dealt with me for the piece for WKRN, an ABC affiliate in Nashville, the very same people who were very professional and open and everything, when I called and said I'm doing this piece for Essence Magazine, were outrageously, I can't even describe how unprofessional and nasty they were. It was almost, it mirrors some of what Suketu says about the Booger incident. But what was really striking was, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this story? I mean, they were asking me questions that I found to be extremely inappropriate that for them to be asking a writer or reporter from a magazine, in particular a magazine like Essence. And of course, this attitude was absent from the way they dealt with me in doing the television series. What was really even more, I think, outrageous about it is that one of the public information officers for the military went behind my back and called my editor and said he promised me that he'd let me see the story before. So I want to see the story. I want to see and of course I had not done that. To me, that is the kind of thing, the kind of nuances about race in this business that really are still there to some extent, and that we have to have our antennas up to combat them. And we have to really think about that and just think about the ways in which race is dealt with in a very subtle way. I mean, in some ways, racism is no longer as loud as we may. I mean, it is actually when you look at some of the police incidents and other things. But the persistence of race and the way it manifests itself in the news media is still problematic, and we have to really be attuned to that. Uh, Now I want to back away from the negative, and really looking at you and seeing the promise and seeing the future of this business, and seeing and getting excited about your presence. And what I want to make sure that you do while you're here, echoing Jason and others, is networking. I got my first job actually because of a student, a classmate of mine at a journalism school. I won't say the name of that place where I went to grad school, but a place uptown. And that was how I got my first job, actually, at uh, where I gained enormous experience. So the network and get to know your classmates, because that is something that is crucial. Also, really absorb New York City with your curiosity. That is something that you've got 3 semesters to really do, to the first incoming students at least. And those so third semesters, you just have a little bit of time left, but still continue to do that. Really utilize your curiosity and do all the stories you can think of doing in New York or trying to do. That will also be beneficial as when you talk in interviews about the work that you've done here. And of course, the other thing is trying to publish work here. That's important too. Uh, I want to say that if any of you ever have any questions about anything, I'm happy to talk about pieces I've written, work I've done at any time. I'm here at 714's, my office, whether you're in my program or not. Feel free to drop by or to email or whatever, set an appointment. But welcome, and remember the battle is still on when it comes to covering marginalized communities and when it comes to protecting truth in politics. And I write a lot about politics, so that is an arena that I feel, particularly in this day and age, for a variety of reasons, I really feel we have to be out there and really, really pushing now, if ever, if ever any other time, really.
Thank you, David. I'm Professor Rachel Swarns, as you know. I am relatively new at NYU, though not so new anymore. I can't say I'm so new anymore. I'm a longtime reporter and correspondent for the New York Times. I spent 22 years as a full-time reporter and correspondent for the Times. I'm a contributing writer now. I've done kind of the whole range of things that newspaper reporters do. I got my start at the Tampa Bay Times, which is used to be the St. Petersburg Times, and then the Miami Herald, and then moved on to the Times. But I should even back it up a little more and tell you that I'm a New Yorker through and through, born in Queens, at Springfield Gardens, Queens. I grew up in Staten Island, and that's a book in and of itself. My mother is from the Caribbean, came here as a little girl in the 50s. My father is from the segregated South, from North Carolina, and came here around the same time. And I grew up in a family that, we weren't, it wasn't a family of writers. Like, that was not the thing that people did. I think that I was always someone, though, that I knew that I wanted to be one. I thought maybe I might be a novelist and realized, oh, no, I'm going to have some bills. I'm going to have to do something else. And discovered journalism in high school. And I would say that, all throughout my career, as a Black woman, you experience things. I would say that I've been second-guessed and underestimated a lot. But I would also say that, I've learned an incredible amount that, I would love to share with you, and I'm going to get to that. But as a newspaper reporter, just to give you a sense of kind of the work that I've done, I've covered floods, I've covered hurricanes, I've written about the arts, I wrote a weekly column for the New York Times. I worked as a correspondent in the Washington Bureau. I worked overseas in Cuba, Northern Ireland, Russia. I was the Johannesburg bureau chief for the Times, and most recently, what I do is mostly I investigate history. I look at slavery and its legacies and how we live with it. My first book was about Michelle Obama's ancestors, charting their journey from slavery to the White House in 5 generations that emerged out of my reporting on her first year in the White House. And my most recent work examined Georgetown and the Catholic Church and their roots in slavery with a book that just came out in June. And I guess what I would say is echoing some of the things that everyone has mentioned here. But you know, being new in the business, you know, I said I've been second guessed, I've been underestimated. I'm a really short person, like I'm like 5'1", so that speaks to it. That happens too. But you know, when I was as young people, you know, sometimes, you know, you've got this drive, you've got this idea. Your bosses are like, okay, yes, but what I really need you to do is the events calendar, and you know, that happens. I'll tell a story from my second job. I was a police reporter at the Miami Herald, and it was such a foundational experience for me. I always tell this story. I got a tip. I was a police reporter, and I got a tip about a young woman who supposedly had been raped by a police officer. And so I ran to my editor and said, hey, you know, I've just got this tip. You know, I'm going to need time to try and track this down. And so I'm not going to be able to, you know, do the murders and everything every day. I need like 2 or 3 weeks to do this. And he kind of laughed at me, basically. And he said, you know, yeah, okay, you got a tip. How are you going to get that story? You know, I was like, maybe I was 24 years old. It was my second job. And I kind of walked back to my desk feeling really deflated because I was kind of like, he was right, you know, like, how was I going to get that story? And luckily for me, I sat next to Sidney Freedberg, a 2-time Pulitzer Prize winner, who saw me coming back, kind of slinking back to my desk and said, what happened? I told her what happened. And she told me something so important. She said, okay, right, you're the cops reporter. So you've got to cover murders, that's true, and all the other crimes that happen. She said, but what are you doing after work today? She said, what are you doing tomorrow morning? No one controls that time. It was the most empowering thing that anyone ever told me. She said, no one can tell you not to work on a story. He can tell you not to work on it during your hours. She said, have you done everything? I was like, no, I did everything. I knew a little bit. I knew where this supposedly happened. I stood on the corner there and handed out my card. Has anyone ever heard about this? I FOIA'd all that I could. It was Florida. You can get a little more. I finally got the number, the case number for this investigation, and I did a Hail Mary and called the records room and said, hi, I've just got this case number and I'm just looking for the address of the victim. And the person got quiet for a second and said, who are you? And I was like, oh gosh. I was like, I'm a reporter for the Miami Herald. And he gave me her name and he gave me the address, and it was a front page story, all, you know. And so I tell you that, I mean, there are also times where we work really hard on something and it doesn't work out. But I would say, you know, work hard, work harder, you know. Some of the most undesirable shifts that you will be offered or required to take are like the weekends, like nights, are often really valuable times to be there because you are there, and you know the experienced people don't want to work those shifts, and when news happens, you're the one who's there. Get there early, stay late. I know that, you know, self-care is important, and I'm a big person. I believe that. Probably, maybe I need to believe it more, but I would say that. The other thing I would say is, as everyone has said, is that reach out to us. Look at our faculty, like look online, look at who's here. You know, look at the full-time faculty, look at the adjuncts. We have amazing people here. And it doesn't matter if you're in our classes, you know, reach out to us. If there's someone who's doing some great work on podcasting or someone who's doing some great work in documentary and you see them on our website, say, hey, I'm an NYU student, I'd love to talk to you about this. When we bring people into your classes, like follow up with them, really. Like anyone who comes into my classes, I tell them, hey, you know, I'm gonna share your email address, okay? So reach out to them. And then the last thing I'd say is publish, 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 publish. I tell students in my class, please get a good grade in my class. I want you to work hard for me. But what's more important than anything is to use your time here to publish. We have student newspapers here. Sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to do that. Really, I mean, those are stepping stones. Publish, publish, publish. Yeah, that's what I have. We're going to take questions from you if you have any questions. No? All right. Well, we'll be around. Oh, yay! Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Raza. I am from Lahore, Pakistan. I came to New York last year. This is my first time outside my country, and I've learned a lot. I've been a reporter in Pakistan, and it's been a great experience, not just at NYU, but around the city, meeting new people and finding out ways how to bring out public interest stories. There's one thing that not only bothers me all the time, but I think a lot of other international students as well, is that when we get out of NYU, there are possibilities in the market, but there is a particular immigration visa regime that governs the stay that we have here, the amount of time we can spend in the country, and the amount of hours we can work. And it is almost a certainty that no organization is currently willing to sponsor a lot of work visas for people who are not from the United States. So my question is, can you please say anything that you know about this matter? Because this is something that I have felt a lot of us feel and are bothered about, but we also do not have clarity, and we just go out with the hope that something might happen for us. So if you can talk about any experience that you've had, any advice you can give on that matter, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Although Reza is my student and I'm extremely proud of him, I have only been director of GLOJO for 1 year. So this is my second year, and I don't know, honestly. I moved to New York from the United Kingdom that has slightly more gentle and generous rules around time that is extended to students after they finish their degrees, although they're coming for that time there, but I know those rules very well. So I wonder if my colleagues who've been here longer might know. We will dedicate ourselves to learning more. But I absolutely see that. I mean, you come here, you're trained, and you want to be able to have a window of time, a fair window to be able to see what the market can offer you. And you should have that right, but I don't know how we get it for you.
I've seen that problem too. I've seen that problem, and I think we just need to figure out what we can do best for you. And I know that answer might be somewhat empty, but likewise, I don't know exactly what we can do after having witnessed that myself with other students in situations.
So that's an excellent question. There's a certain period of time that you can work in the country after you graduate. It's the OPT window, and I don't deal directly with students. There's a Office of International Students, I think that. So I don't know if is it 3 years, because so you have 3 years to work after you graduate, and I'm always amazed at how it kind of sneaks up on people, that how unprepared students are. I think it should be something, frankly, that should be in the orientation for international students as soon as they get here. Start finding a job that you can have after graduation. Because I've done this for students in the past where they are like, it's April and they're graduating in May and they have nothing to that will allow them to stay in the country. So I really think that should be something that you begin investigating as soon as you get here, and particularly your internship that you have in the summer after your first year should be something that you can parlay into an OPT. And the other piece of advice I'd give you is, I know it's really difficult to find people that will sponsor a work visa. It's easier to find freelance work. So it's what Rachel said about publishing a lot while you're in the program and racking up these freelance contacts. So, you know, if you have to go back to Pakistan a year or two or whenever after you graduate, at least you'll go back with the names of editors who will be interested in stories about Pakistan and Afghanistan and South Asia in general, right? These are the contacts you can make here, which you can use for, when you go back, you have that credibility of having an NYU journalism degree. So you'll be above the pack in Pakistan, and at some point you'll be able to come back here. So anyway, the short answer is, it is not a good environment for journalists, particularly foreign journalists, because there's a lot of pressure, and even under the Biden administration, to cut down on immigrant visas for foreign journalists, because it's not as if there's a shortage of American journalists. So the thing you can do is just prepare in advance and keep networking while you're in the program. This actually, I'm always amazed at the kind of people that come to the 7th floor, which I would have given my eye teeth to meet when I was your age. And sometimes just, you know, I know everyone's really busy and schedules are really crowded and people have classes and jobs and internships, but there's so much on offer in terms of the kind of people that we bring to you on a plate with watercress around it. You know, have your CV ready, come to these events, even if you're not interested in a topic, meet these people and just spread out your CV.
Yes, a few more questions. Thank you. Here.
So my cousin also just came here for university from Pakistan, and he really started despairing. But he got like a job, like with like a month left to go. So I just wanted to say, don't despair. And also, he took a job outside of like wherever he was studying. So if, like it has to come to that. It has to come to that, but don't despair.
Hi. I'm kind of asking this question to everyone here, but since I arrived to New York, I think the word that I've been listening the most is networking. Networking. You should start doing networking. Build networks, whatever. But I don't know. I really don't know how to do that. You know, it's hard to establish relationships with people. Just thinking about that you need to have a job, that you need to get a job, or that you need to like create opportunities. So I would really like to ask you, what would your advice be for like people that are starting like a career in journalism to build networks and to do it like genuinely, not very, forced and yeah.
I'll just say this, echoing what K2 said just now about the people who come here to speak. And the people who come through. And, you know, all of us bring in speakers to our classes who are esteemed in the business. So that's the first thing. I mean, that you just see so many people that you should really tap into in terms of their networks. And then the other thing, of course, is who's sitting right next to you right now. And who's sitting, you look right next to you. Do not leave this do not leave this session without getting their names and numbers. I mean, and I mean, that might sound kind of simplistic, but that's really what it's about. I even, remember as a graduate student when you go out on stories, just keeping the names and numbers of the people that you talk to, and you never know when you're going to need them. You never, I uh, think that always have your notepad and ready to write down the name and email and telephone number of someone, not just people who can help you professionally, that's important, that's very, very, very important, but also just people that can help lead you to interesting stories. It's just a matter of really being open in a genuine way most any time.
And I get what you were trying to say at the end, which is that, there's kind of an ick factor, right? Like this transactional kind of thing that it doesn't, and I understand that. I think that starting here is kind of the best way, because like we are here to help you. I mean, that is literally what we're here to do. So starting with your professors, I mean, literally, like I said, if you haven't, look at NYU journalism faculty and just look at the people who are here and look at whose work speaks to you and reach out to them. And you're a student here. That is totally people, that's what we're here for. And then ask them, like, hey, I'm interested in this kind of work. Here's what I'm taking. What would you suggest? What kinds of things would you suggest in terms of experience, et cetera? Internships, job, training, whatever. And then ask them, is there anyone that you know who you think would be a good connection for me? And then you've got someone who has an introduction. It feels maybe a little not like, looking at, the Daily Beast and seeing, oh, that person's doing something and cold calling. It's a faculty member who says, oh yeah, I've got a friend who, I think would be great to talk to if you're interested in X. And then they connect you. I know I often, as I said, tell students in my classes, please, people are here, reach out to them. And then I ask the journalist and they're like, oh, nope, one. And then students say, well, like what you said, well, but like literally, what am I going to do? And I would say, literally, I would say, send an email saying, thank you. It was great having you come to speak today. It was interesting what you said about whatever. I'm actually working on this right now. I've got, X number of years to go, and, I hope that we can keep in touch. And then if it's really someone who's impressed you, I'd follow their work. And, I'd say maybe in 3 months or 4 months, say, hey, I saw your, piece on whatever, and that was really interesting. Here's what I'm working on now, I think it can feel awkward, but it is like really, 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 really important. And I think if you start here, there's a huge range of connections right here, and then you can build out. Yes.
Hi, my name is Anthony, and I'm a journalist from the Philippines. So I think observation, the problem in the American media is not so much that there is no diversity. The newsrooms are becoming more and more diverse, but the problem is that the journalism that comes out of this supposedly diverse newsroom is not so diverse. What do I mean by that? Journalists of color are not allowed to sometimes express their views or report from a particular point of view. It's still the cookie cutter objective type of reporting that we're seeing so much here. And there's a long discussion about this. And I was wondering, in your experience, was it like this before, and are you seeing some shift right now? Thank you.
And are you talking specifically about objectivity and kind of point of view, or if you could just, okay. It's a very interesting question. We had one of the panels that we had in the spring was about objectivity, and it was a panel featuring leaders of the journalism affiliate groups, National Association of Black Journalists, National Association of Asian Journalists, and I think National Association of Hispanic Journalists. There were their program officers there. And, you know, this is a roiling, you know, objectivity is a kind of roiling debate kind of within the industry right now, and there's a lot of things that are shifting. I think that it is true that there have been times where even though, you know, the newsrooms that were more diverse, sometimes reporters of color say that, you know, the stories that we want to do, though, are not the stories that get greenlit, right? I think, you know, that can be an issue. Of course, the truth is that there are often stories that we want to do as journalists, regardless, that our editors don't approve of. But it's, you know, I think it is changing. I think we have a long way to go on the objectivity and being able to kind of speak your mind from, you know, where you sit. I think that's complicated and hard still. I mean, because, you know, it depends. I mean, there's more room for it than there was. But if you want to work for the New York Times, for instance, as not an opinion writer, right, as a news writer, there are rules about, you know, how you present on social media. I think everybody has seen instances where people on social media, journalists on social media have fallen afoul of the rules of their media organizations. And you know, sometimes you can rage about it. I mean, there are often times where I'm like at my keyboard, oh, nope, not gonna, I don't need to say that actually. Don't need to. So anyway, I don't know that that's I don't know that that's a satisfying answer really. I think that things are changing, but it is still kind of rigid. I don't know what you guys think.
I think one of the best kinds of training to be a reporter is to work for a wire service. You can and should have opinions. It's a different question about whether your readers necessarily want your opinions with the news. So a lot of it depends, of course, on the publication that you're writing for. You know, I think it's very important to get trained in the basics of doing that kind of journalism. And of course, there've been these debates about whether there is something called objective journalism, which is actually true. Has journalism ever been objective? There's been lots of media studies. People look at all the ways in which the news is colored, and the roles that editors have, you know. But what you need to do as a journalist is go out and follow the truth wherever it leads, and then explain that truth first to yourself and then to the reader, right? So, but then between yourself and the reader, there's this creature called the editor. And your version of the truth may not be the same as your editor's version of the truth. So the short answer is really, there's just no telling. I think there's much more latitude now, even in places like the New York Times.
Much more.
For a news article to have a personal point of view. It used to be you could never use the I in a news article. And now increasingly you can do this. And I think it's a good thing. But then I also really like a good, well-sourced AP or Reuters story where I know that this thing is, that there's a certain kind of trust that we have in this. And I think as AI takes over more and more, as we have this incredible splitting of the media universe, the places where, you know, they have this kind of fidelity to the truth and rigorous fact-checking and editing. These will be the sources of news that we trust. And, you can be an opinion writer after you learn to be a news reporter.
Yes.
So a problem I consistently run into is when doing interviews by myself, there'll be a moment where I'm always asked where I'm originally from. And not really when I'm with someone that's quite senior, it's always when I'm by myself. And it's a question that someone who doesn't specifically look like me wouldn't get asked. And sometimes when I tell the truth, I notice that there's a change in perception and it's politicized. And there has been occasions when I actually lie, and then they find out through social media, and then it bites me back because they think I'm not being honest. But I just didn't want to kind of get into those politicized conversations, which is to do with my personal life in a setting like that. So I was just wondering.
I didn't hear the first comment that you made. You said that there's situations when what? I'm sorry.
When I'm doing an interview by myself and the interview stops and the person I'm interviewing asks where I'm originally from, where my parents are from, where I grew up, and I think that when I'm by myself, it really hones in on the detail of that question. So I'm wondering what you say in those situations and how you handle that.
You know, there have been times where I would find people kind of inordinately interested in my background. You know, asking, where are you from? New York? No, where are your parents from? You know, or, you know, I also have gotten the kind of, you know, crazy, oh, and you speak so well, you know, you speak so well, you're so articulate. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Though my father has a great response to that. When people would praise him for his use of the English language, which he was born here and grew up using, he would say, and your English is really good too. Where'd you learn? And it's one of those things that sometimes we face that, you know, other people don't, and it just makes me so tired, you know, because it's just tiring. It's not part of the job. It's, you know, I guess we could say that sometimes people are just curious, you know. When it gets kind of, though, sometimes it's this kind of persistence. I've had it kind of like, how to explain her in this space. That's where I've gotten it. Like, it's when they're getting like more and more persistent, and sometimes it gets to, oh, the immigrant. Oh, that's what it is. You got an immigrant parent or something like that. I don't know. I mean, like the flip side of me would want to say, start turning the tables on them and ask, you know, oh yeah, well, you know, I'm from here and my parents are from here, and where are you from or whatever. But I don't know. What do you guys think in terms of responding to that? Because that, it feels like, again, it's.
I lose my guard sometimes, I think.
Well, you know, one of the things you have to think about actually is, and might be somewhat of a crude answer, is that you have to, your job is to get that story and to get those details and to get, you know, and so if the person is that ignorant, maybe you can use that to your advantage in pulling information out of him or her in terms of the story. I mean, I've been, I hope this doesn't offend anyone to say this, but I've been, you know, cross country with Trump supporters, with people, all kinds of points of views. And, you know, sometimes, you know, you have to bite your tongue when you're the reporter trying to get the information. And that's what's most important, is getting what you need for the story. And, you know, the fact that they ask you that, depending on who you're doing the piece for, that might actually find its way into your piece. If it's for a publication that brings in first person or brings in the encounters, if you're doing a profile on someone and they ask you that question, that's something to think about considering for the profile. What kind of person would ask that? And that's something to educate your readers to who the person is and you're doing a profile on. So I wouldn't when you're out trying to get information, you have to, you have to use whatever you can actually. And when you're trying to get a sense of a person that you're reporting on, you have to, understand he or she who asked that question might be showing some true colors that are interesting for exploration. So I wouldn't actually spend any time feeling bad about it, because it's not your problem also that they have the limited view of the world. You can't fix that in one encounter.
Look, you're asking the person you're interviewing lots of questions. They also have the right to ask you some questions. I get that all the time, and I use it to my advantage, as David mentioned. It's a way of establishing a relationship. And that the answer to that question, where are you from, differs depending on where you are. So when I'm in India, I say I'm from America. And often when I'm here and I find that my foreignness makes me maybe less threatening to some people, I'll say I'm from India. Or other times I'll say I'm from Queens. So at the beginning of the interview, anything you can do to establish some sort of trust, and as in any kind of crime, motive is important. So there's a friend of mine, Vijay Prashad, who's a great radical writer, and he once on a panel, he said, when someone asks me here in this country, where are you from? I know that what they're really saying is, when are you going back?
Right. Why are you here?
Or why are you here? But then I'm also, being the subject of very friendly curiosity because of my accent. Where are you from? Like, tell me where I can get some good Indian food. Anything you can do to establish that little bond of trust at the beginning of the interview can pay off. And of course, if the person's a jerk and they're just asking you this, like, where are you from? What authority do you have to do this interview, to speak to me? That's another whole. So you've got to figure out their motive in asking this question.
Use their ignorance to your advantage. That's the other thing that I'd say.
We have one more question, Rachel?
Hi, my name is Jeliza. So I have a question and it's really bouncing off of what this gentleman said here in the back about objectivity in the newsroom, and specifically from my personal experience. I think as answering as a Black woman, and generally what people would see as just a Black reporter, I think when we talk about objectivity, one of the things, I went to a conference at Howard, and Nicole Hannah-Jones, the creator of the 1619 Project, was there. And I had asked her a really interesting question about when she was at New York Times and trying to put together her piece. And I asked her, I was like, for you as a Black woman to put out a piece like that, specifically, you're talking from not only the experience of other Black people in this country, but you're also speaking about your own experience, like in one of them when she talked about her uncle, and how in the newsroom we don't talk enough about how our own experiences are seen as polarizing to even talk about, to write about. And she even, when I asked her, how are you able to put something out like that at the New York Times, she chuckled and she laughed and she was like, that's a story for another time. And I think for a lot of reporters like us, I always get the sentiment of, let me not even tell you about how long it took me or how I had to push for me to even talk about my own experiences, because a lot of times when we talk about like race or our own experiences as Black people in this country, that they're not necessarily encouraged as much to talk from our own experience as it is to just objectify it and say, talk about the issue, don't talk about the issue. So my question is, I've actually experienced this myself. What do you do when you want to push a story that you may have a personal connection to, but it's still worth reporting about, but not wanting your editor to see it or be told that it's a little too personal or too polarizing to write about, even though it might be a hard hitter for the subject that you're talking about.
Are you talking about a story where when you say you have a personal connection, like a personal connection? Like if you could be a little more specific, because it would be helpful. It's not like an issue that you really care about, but you might have a personal connection to?
More like a story that you care about.
Okay.
But you may have a connection, you want to write about it because you may have a connection to it. Like, let's say we're talking about, I'll relate this back to hers.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about her uncle in the piece, but the piece wasn't necessarily just about her uncle. It was about a bigger issue. So, but she was able to tie her personal experience back to the bigger issue.
So you're talking about in the pitching process.
Yes, in the pitching
in
process.
the pitching process, how much do you say about your personal connection to something?
Yes, in the way that
because you don't want it to be used to a disadvantage, as it could be in some places where, again, there's a time when, okay, let's kill that story so we can just automatically say, well, you're biased or you have a it's a very interesting question on some level. When do you, or how do you really account for your own connection to something when you're pitching? If you think it's to your advantage to do so, I definitely say do that. But, if example, I remember I was doing a series once on historic HBCUs, and I'm a graduate of an HBCU, and I could sense that there was a question about me doing this series, that I was going to be biased, and I was going to be. It was at a time in around the time of, I don't know if any of you, it was more so about actually public historically black colleges and all of their, talk about integrating them, as well as should we be closing some of them down, and that was a big issue with Tennessee State University, which, and I pushed to do that and just pushed through kind of, because I wanted to make sure it got done fairly and it wasn't some slam job. But, I think it's a delicate dance about how you negotiate that when you, in particular, as it relates to race, of course. And I don't think I'm answering your question, because I don't know that it's really there's a neat answer to that question. I mean, it's kind of like some of it is, as you're pitching, you have to think about when it's to your advantage to getting the piece to put that information out there, or maybe it's to your advantage to get the assignment and then roll with that information. And I know that sounds kind of deceptive, perhaps, but that's not an easy. I don't think there's a set answer to that, if that makes sense.
And the caution would be, of course, that any ties that you don't disclose could be a real problem. Because if someone complains about the story and then they say, oh, by the way, she's got an uncle who had this kind of situation. Even though that might be entirely irrelevant to how you covered it, if you haven't disclosed it, it can be a problem, so you have to be mindful of that too.